The email arrived at 4:47 p.m. on a Friday. Subject line, regarding Monday's celebration dinner. 12 words that would change everything. Diana, we don't have a plate for you at the winner's dinner. The message came from Lester Harmon, Chief Executive Officer of Harmon and Associates. The same man who'd shaken my hand 3 days earlier when I closed the Riverside development deal. A $7 million contract. The largest in our firm's 30-year history. The same man who was now telling me I wasn't welcome at the celebration. I read the email twice, then a third time. The fluorescent lights in my office hummed above me, the only sound in the suddenly too quiet space. Outside my window, the city stretched out in the golden hour light, oblivious, indifferent, moving forward while my world stopped. There was more to the email, of course. Corporate language, restructuring, budgetary constraints, eliminating redundancies. My position was being dissolved, effective immediately. Human resources would be in touch about my final paycheck. No bonus, no celebration, no job. I'd won them $7 million, and they were letting me go to save on my commission. Before we go further into what happened next, if you're finding this story worth your time, consider subscribing. We're working our way to 5,000 subscribers, and having you along makes all the difference. No pressure, just know you're welcome here. My name is Diana Blair, and until that Friday afternoon, I was Senior Acquisitions Director at Harmon and Associates, a commercial real estate development firm in downtown Seattle. I'd been with the company for 11 years, working my way up from junior analyst to director. I didn't come from money. My father was a union electrician, my mother a public school teacher. They raised me and my two brothers in a modest 3-bedroom house in Tacoma, where we learned the value of a dollar and the importance of keeping your word. That upbringing taught me something the business school graduates in their expensive suits never quite grasped. People aren't numbers on a spreadsheet. The maintenance worker who keeps your office clean has a family to feed. The administrative assistant who schedules your meetings is putting herself through night school. The small business owner you're negotiating with is betting everything on one deal. Empathy wasn't weakness, it was sight. The ability to see the whole picture, understand what people needed, and find solutions that worked for everyone. That's why I was good at my job. That's why I'd closed the Riverside deal when 3 other directors had failed. The Riverside Development Project was a 14-acre parcel on the eastern edge of downtown, prime real estate overlooking the waterfront. The seller was an elderly developer named Howard Chen, no relation to the Chen we don't mention, who'd built half the commercial district in the 1970s and 80s. He was ready to retire, ready to sell, but he was particular about who he sold to. Howard had rejected 3 offers from Harmon and Associates over 18 months. Not because of price, our offers were competitive. He rejected them because he didn't trust the people making them. Then Lester Harmon assigned me to the project. I did my research. Howard Chen had built his business on relationships and integrity. He donated to local charities. He'd never evicted a tenant without cause. When the 2008 recession hit, he'd worked with struggling businesses rather than replacing them with higher-paying renters. So I didn't approach him with spreadsheets and profit projections. I approached him with respect. I met him at his favorite coffee shop, a small place near Pike Place Market that had been there 40 years. We talked about Seattle, about how the city had changed, about his legacy. I listened more than I spoke, and when we finally discussed the sale, I told him the truth. Harmon and Associates wanted to develop mixed-use residential and commercial space. Some luxury condos, yes, but also affordable housing units. Retail space for local businesses, not just national chains. I promised him we'd honor what he'd built. Howard Chen looked at me across that coffee shop table, his hands wrapped around a cup of black coffee, and said, "You mean that, don't you?" "Yes, sir, I do." He sold us the property for $6.2 million. Our development projections put the completed project's value at over $40 million within 5 years. I'd saved the company nearly $1 million compared to our highest offer, and positioned them for a massive return on investment. My commission on the deal per my contract was $210,000. 3 days after closing, Lester Harmon fired me to avoid paying it. I sat in my office until the sun set. The cleaning crew came through around 7, and I waved to Maria, who'd been cleaning our floor for 6 years. She had 3 grandchildren she supported on her wages. I'd helped her navigate the health insurance paperwork when she needed surgery last year. "Working late again, Miss Blair?" she asked, pushing her cart past my door. "Just finishing up some things?" She smiled and moved on, and I wondered if she knew that by Monday I wouldn't be here. If anyone had told her, if anyone would. The office was empty except for security and the cleaning staff. The other directors had left hours ago, probably already at happy hour somewhere, celebrating the weekend. Celebrating the Riverside deal. Celebrating $7 million they'd done nothing to earn. I should have been furious, part of me was. But the stronger emotion was something colder, sharper: calculation. I'd spent 11 years at Harmon and Associates. 11 years learning every aspect of commercial real estate development in this city. 11 years building relationships with city planners, permit officers, inspectors, contractors, and developers. 11 years understanding not just how deals were made, but how buildings actually got built. And in those 11 years, I'd learned something important. The real power wasn't in the corner office. It was in the details. I opened my laptop and pulled up the Riverside project files. Every document, every permit application, every inspection report, every piece of correspondence. I'd been meticulous, I was always meticulous, and it was all here. Then I started looking at Harmon and Associates' other active projects. The Westlake Tower renovation, the Capitol Hill mixed-use development, the Georgetown warehouse conversion, and the crown jewel, the new Harmon and Associates headquarters building. Lester Harmon had been crowing about it for 2 years. A 10-story glass and steel monument to his success, scheduled to open in 6 months. The company would move from our current leased space to a building they owned outright. Harmon's name would be on the lobby wall in 3-foot letters. He'd invested $18 million of the company's capital into the project. I opened the building permits file. The thing about commercial construction is that it's complicated. Not just the building itself, but the web of regulations, permits, inspections, and approvals required before you can break ground. Zoning compliance, environmental impact studies, building codes, fire safety, electrical, plumbing, structural engineering. Every city has its own requirements, and Seattle's were particularly stringent, especially for downtown construction. Every project needed a dozen different permits from a half-dozen different city departments. And every permit had to be current, compliant, and properly filed. I'd learned to navigate this system years ago. Part of my job was ensuring our projects cleared all regulatory hurdles. I knew which forms went to which departments, which inspectors were thorough and which ones were lazy, which regulations had changed and which ones everyone forgot about. I knew the system, and looking at the permits for the new Harmon and Associates headquarters, I knew something else. Something was wrong. The building had broken ground 14 months ago. The frame was up, the exterior was nearly complete, interior work was underway. According to the project timeline, they'd begin moving in by October, but several of the permits in the file were outdated. The environmental impact assessment was 3 years old. It should have been updated when construction began. The stormwater management permit referenced an old city code that had been revised 18 months ago. The occupancy classification seemed wrong for a building of this size. These weren't small issues. These were the kind of problems that could halt construction, that could trigger city inspections, that could, in the worst case, lead to violations and fines. Or condemnation. I sat back in my chair thinking, had I noticed these issues before? Had anyone? The headquarters project wasn't my responsibility. That belonged to Douglas Finch, the director of internal operations. Douglas was competent enough. He'd been with the company almost as long as I had, worked his way up from property management. But he wasn't detail-oriented. He delegated heavily, trusted people to do their jobs, and focused on the big picture. The kind of manager who might not notice if permit paperwork was filed incorrectly. The kind of manager who might not realize when city codes changed. The kind of manager who might assume everything was fine until someone told him otherwise. I pulled up the city's public records database. Every permit, every inspection, every violation for every building in Seattle was a matter of public record. You just needed to know where to look. I found the Harmon and Associates headquarters building, 1247 4th Avenue. And there, in the inspection notes from 6 weeks ago, was a red flag. Noted discrepancies in stormwater permit documentation. Follow-up required. Inspector's recommendation, halt work pending permit revision. The inspection was dated April 15th. Today was May 28th. 6 weeks and no follow-up that I could find in the public record, which meant either the issue had been resolved and the paperwork hadn't been filed yet, or no one at Harmon and Associates knew about it. I checked my watch. 7:45 on a Friday evening. The city permit office was closed, wouldn't reopen until Monday morning. But I had the inspector's name from the report, Thomas Brennan. And I had his direct office number from a project we'd worked on 2 years ago. I didn't call from my office. Something told me not to. Instead, I packed my laptop into my bag, turned off the lights, and left. The security guard at the front desk, Raymond, who'd worked the evening shift for 8 years, looked up as I passed. "Have a good weekend, Miss Blair." "You too, Raymond." He'd find out Monday that I no longer worked here. They all would. The whispers would spread through the building. Diana Blair fired the same week she brought in the biggest deal in company history. People would speculate, gossip, move on. That's how these things worked. I walked out into the Seattle evening. The air was cool, the sky still holding the last light of day. The streets were busy with Friday night crowds, people heading to restaurants, bars, theaters, living their lives while mine had just imploded. I walked 3 blocks south and 1 block east to a parallel street with a view of the Harmon and Associates headquarters construction site. The building rose 10 stories, its glass exterior reflecting the city lights. Construction equipment sat silent in the yard. By Monday morning, crews would be back at work, moving toward that October deadline. I pulled out my phone and dialed Thomas Brennan's office number. I didn't expect him to answer. It was nearly 8 o'clock on a Friday evening. But city inspectors kept odd hours and Thomas had always been dedicated to his work. The phone rang 3 times, then. "Brennan, Mr. Brennan, this is Diana Blair from Harmon and Associates. I hope I'm not catching you at a bad time." "Miss Blair, no, I'm just finishing up some paperwork. What can I do for you?" Professional, direct, good. "I'm calling about the inspection you conducted at 1247 4th Avenue on April 15th. The Harmon and Associates headquarters building. I saw your note about the stormwater permit discrepancies." A pause. "Yes, I flagged that for follow-up. Has your office received the violation notice?" My heart rate picked up, but my voice stayed steady. "That's what I'm trying to determine. There may have been a communication issue on our end. Can you tell me the status?" Another pause, longer this time. I could hear papers rustling in the background. "Let me pull up the file," Thomas said. "Give me just a moment." I waited, watching the headquarters building across the street. Lights were on inside, probably the security system or maybe night crews working. $18 million of Lester Harmon's investment rising into the Seattle skyline. "Okay," Thomas said, "here it is." The inspection on April 15th revealed several permit discrepancies. The stormwater management permit was filed under an outdated city code. The environmental impact assessment hadn't been updated since initial site acquisition, and the occupancy classification was listed as general office space, but the building plans show amenities that would require a mixed-use classification. What does that mean in practical terms? It means the permits aren't in compliance with current city regulations. I filed a notice of violation on April 18th, requiring the owner to update and refile the permits within 30 days. And if that doesn't happen, the city has the authority to halt construction, and if the violations aren't corrected, to condemn the building as non-compliant. The words hung in the air between us. "Mr. Brennan, when you say you filed the notice on April 18th, where exactly did you send it?" "To the address of record for the property owner." "Let me see. Harmon and Associates, 1150 Pike Street, Suite 800. Our current office. The building we were leasing, not the building we were constructing." "And you sent it by?" "Standard mail, as per city procedure. Should have arrived within 3 to 5 business days." 3 to 5 business days from April 18th would have been late April. Almost a month ago. "Mr. Brennan, I need to ask you something directly. Is it possible that notice never reached the appropriate person in our organization?" A longer pause this time. When Thomas spoke again, his voice was careful. "Miss Blair, are you telling me Harmon and Associates isn't aware of the violation?" I'm telling you, I became aware of it about 20 minutes ago by checking the public inspection records myself. And I'm no longer certain the responsible parties in my organization received your notice. That's concerning. What's the deadline for compliance? May 18th was 30 days from when I filed. That was 10 days ago, so we're past the deadline. You are. I took a breath. The evening air was cool in my lungs. Across the street, the headquarters building stood against the darkening sky, oblivious to the ticking clock. What happens now? I asked. Normally, we allow a grace period for administrative issues, but Miss Blair, this isn't a minor violation. These are foundational permits. If the building isn't properly permitted, it shouldn't be under construction at all. I understand. I need to ask you directly, is Harmon and Associates going to address these violations? And there it was, the question that mattered. If I said yes, I'd be speaking for a company that had just fired me. I'd be protecting Lester Harmon, who'd terminated me to save on my bonus. I'd be helping the same people who thought I was disposable. If I said no, or if I said I didn't know, Thomas Brennan would do his job. He'd escalate the violation. He'd send inspectors. He'd halt construction. He might condemn the building. Mr. Brennan, I need to be honest with you. As of this afternoon, I'm no longer employed by Harmon and Associates. My position was eliminated. I'm calling you on my personal phone, on my own time, because I discovered these violations while reviewing my files and I felt it was important to follow up. Silence on the other end of the line. But I can't speak for what Harmon and Associates will or won't do because I no longer have the authority to do so. What I can tell you is that the person responsible for this project is Douglas Finch, Director of Internal Operations. Whether he's aware of your April 18th notice, I genuinely don't know. I see. Thomas's voice had shifted, not unfriendly, but more formal. Miss Blair, I appreciate your diligence in bringing this to my attention. Given what you've told me, I'll need to escalate this violation to my supervisor on Monday morning. We'll attempt to contact Harmon and Associates directly, and if we don't receive a satisfactory response, we'll proceed with enforcement action. That seems appropriate. For what it's worth, I'm sorry about your position. You were always professional to work with. Thank you, Mr. Brennan, I appreciate that. I ended the call and stood on that parallel street for a long time looking at the building. $18 million. Lester Harmon's pride and joy. The monument to his success that he'd been planning for years. And it was built on faulty permits that no one had bothered to check. By Monday morning, Thomas Brennan would escalate the violation to his supervisor. By Monday afternoon, probably city inspectors would contact Harmon and Associates. By Tuesday, maybe Wednesday, they'd realize the scope of the problem. The permits would need to be completely refiled. Environmental impact assessments would need to be updated. The occupancy classification would need to be changed. All of this would require approval from multiple city departments. Even if they moved quickly, even if they made it a priority, the process would take weeks, maybe months, and until the permits were in compliance, construction would be halted. The October deadline would be impossible. The company would stay in their leased space, paying rent they'd planned to eliminate. The headquarters building would sit empty, incomplete, a very expensive monument to someone's oversight. Lester Harmon would lose money, a lot of money. Not as much as $7 million, but enough to hurt, enough to matter. I turned away from the building and started walking toward the bus stop. I didn't own a car, never needed one in Seattle, and the bus would take me home to my apartment in Capitol Hill. As I walked, I thought about Howard Chen, who'd trusted me with his legacy. I thought about Maria, who'd lose her job when Harmon and Associates eventually downsized. I thought about my father, the union electrician, who'd taught me that a contract was a promise. Lester Harmon had broken his promise to me. He'd violated my contract to save money on a bonus I'd earned. I hadn't violated anything. I'd simply made a phone call to verify the status of a city inspection. I'd simply been thorough, professional, diligent. The same qualities that had made me good at my job for 11 years. The bus arrived and I got on. I ended the call and stood on that parallel street for a long time looking at the building. $18 million. Lester Harmon's pride and joy, the monument to his success that he'd been planning for years. And it was built on faulty permits that no one had bothered to check. By Monday morning, Thomas Brennan would escalate the violation to his supervisor. By Monday afternoon, probably city inspectors would contact Harmon and Associates. By Tuesday, maybe Wednesday, they'd realize the scope of the problem. The permits would need to be completely refiled. Environmental impact assessments would need to be updated. The occupancy classification would need to be changed. All of this would require approval from multiple city departments. Even if they moved quickly, even if they made it a priority, the process would take weeks, maybe months. And until the permits were in compliance, construction would be halted. The October deadline would be impossible. The company would stay in their leased space, paying rent they'd planned to eliminate. The headquarters building would sit empty, incomplete, a very expensive monument to someone's oversight. Lester Harmon would lose money, a lot of money, not as much as $7 million, but enough to hurt, enough to matter. I turned away from the building and started walking toward the bus stop. I didn't own a car, never needed one in Seattle, and the bus would take me home to my apartment in Capitol Hill. As I walked, I thought about Howard Chen, who'd trusted me with his legacy. I thought about Maria, who'd lose her job when Harmon and Associates eventually downsized. I thought about my father, the union electrician, who'd taught me that a contract was a promise. Lester Harmon had broken his promise to me. He'd violated my contract to save money on a bonus I'd earned. I hadn't violated anything. I'd simply made a phone call to verify the status of a city inspection. I'd simply been thorough, professional, diligent. The same qualities that had made me good at my job for 11 years. The bus arrived and I got on. The weekend passed slowly. Saturday, I stayed in my apartment working through the shock. I'd lost jobs before, that was part of working in the private sector, but never like this. Never after delivering the biggest success of my career. I called my parents on Sunday, told them what had happened. My father was furious, wanted to know if I could sue. My mother was worried, wanted to know if I had savings, if I'd be okay. I'll be fine, I told them, and meant it. Because I would be. I had savings, I had experience. I had a track record that spoke for itself. The Riverside deal alone would look incredible on my resume. Companies would want to hire me. But that wasn't what I was thinking about. I was thinking about Monday morning. I woke up early, made coffee, and sat by my window watching the sun rise over the city. Somewhere out there, Thomas Brennan was probably already at his office, reviewing the Harmon and Associates file, preparing to call his supervisor, preparing to make a phone call that would change everything. And somewhere else, Lester Harmon was probably sleeping in, looking forward to his winner's dinner tonight. The celebration for the Riverside deal. The dinner I wouldn't be attending, the dinner where he'd take credit for my work. My phone rang at 9:17 a.m. Unknown number, but a Seattle area code. I answered. Diana Blair? Miss Blair, this is Catherine Osgood from the Seattle Department of Construction and Inspections. I'm Thomas Brennan's supervisor. Do you have a few minutes to talk? Of course. Thomas briefed me on your conversation Friday evening regarding the violations at 1247 4th Avenue. I wanted to follow up with you directly before we contact Harmon and Associates. Can you confirm the details of what you told him? I went through it again, the email firing me, the review of project files, the discovery of the permit violations, the realization that the April 18th notice might not have reached the appropriate people. Catherine Osgood listened without interrupting. When I finished, she said, Miss Blair, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest. All right. Is this a revenge play? Are you trying to cause problems for your former employer because of how they treated you? I'd expected the question. No, ma'am. If I wanted revenge, I'd have called a reporter, not a city inspector. I called Mr. Brennan because I found violations that pose a legitimate regulatory issue, and I wanted to verify their status. What you do with that information is your job, not mine. A long pause. Then, that's a fair answer. All right, Miss Blair, here's what's going to happen. I'm going to call Harmon and Associates this morning and speak with their Director of Internal Operations. I'm going to ask about the status of the permit corrections. If they're not aware of the violations or if they haven't made progress on correcting them, I'm going to schedule an inspection for tomorrow morning. And if the violations are confirmed, then we issue a stop work order until the permits are brought into compliance. Depending on the severity of the violations, we may also assess fines and potentially pursue condemnation proceedings if the building can't be brought up to code. I understand. For what it's worth, Miss Blair, you did the right thing. These regulations exist for a reason. Buildings need to be safe, compliant, and properly permitted. If Harmon and Associates cut corners on this, that's on them, not you. Thank you. I ended the call and sat in my apartment waiting. The call to Harmon and Associates would happen soon. Catherine Osgood would speak to Douglas Finch. Douglas would panic, scramble, try to figure out what had happened to the April 18th notice. And eventually, someone would realize that Diana Blair, the director they'd fired on Friday, had been the one to alert the city to the violations. My phone rang again at 11:33 a.m. Douglas Finch. I almost didn't answer. But curiosity got the better of me. Diana Blair. Diana, it's Doug. We need to talk. I don't work for Harmon and Associates anymore, Doug. We don't need to talk about anything. The city just called me about permit violations on the headquarters building. They said you contacted them? I contacted them to verify the status of an inspection report I found in the public records. What the city chooses to do with that information is their decision. Diana, do you have any idea what you've done? They're threatening to shut down construction. Do you know how much that's going to cost us? I imagine quite a bit. Why would you do this? Are you trying to destroy the company? And there it was, the accusation, the blame. I didn't do anything except verify public information, Doug. If the permits aren't in compliance, that's not my fault. I haven't worked on the headquarters project in over a year. You had no right. I had every right. I'm a private citizen who accessed public records. If you're looking for someone to blame, maybe start with whoever ignored the violation notice the city sent on April 18th. Silence. What violation notice? The one Thomas Brennan sent to 1150 Pike Street, Suite 800. Your office, Doug, your project, your responsibility. I never received any violation notice. Then you should probably figure out why not. But that's not my problem anymore. I ended the call. He tried calling back twice. I didn't answer. At 2:15 p.m., I got a call from a number I recognized. Lester Harmon's direct line. This time I did answer. I wanted to hear it. Diana, it's Lester. I think there's been a serious misunderstanding. About what? About your employment status. I've been reviewing your file and I think we acted hastily on Friday. I'd like to offer you your position back, effective immediately, with a raise and your full bonus for the Riverside deal. I smiled, alone in my apartment. That's generous, Lester. What changed? I don't think the company properly appreciated your contributions. I want to correct that. This wouldn't have anything to do with the city inspection scheduled for tomorrow morning, would it? A pause, a long one. Diana, we can work together on this. The headquarters building is important to the company. I need someone detail-oriented handling the permit issues, and you're the best we have. You had the best. And you fired her to save $200,000. I'm offering you more than that now, $250, plus your position back, plus a promotion to VP of Operations if you want it. $250,000. A promotion, everything I'd worked toward for years. All I had to do was fix Lester Harmon's problem, save his building, make the violations go away. No, I said. Diana, be reasonable. I am being reasonable. You fired me on Friday to avoid paying my bonus. Today is Monday, and suddenly I'm valuable again because you need something from me. That's not how respect works, Lester. That's not how loyalty works. If this is about revenge, it's not about revenge, it's about consequences. You made a business decision on Friday, I'm making one today. The answer is no. You'll never work in Seattle real estate again, I'll make sure of it. You're welcome to try. But when people ask why you fired your top director the same week she closed a $7 million deal, what are you going to tell them? And when they ask why your headquarters building got condemned because of permit violations you didn't catch, what's that going to say about your company? I ended the call. He didn't call back. At 4:30 p.m., I got a text from Maria, the cleaning woman from the office. Miss Blair heard what happened. So sorry, you were always kind to me. Hope you land somewhere good. I texted back, thank you, Maria. That means a lot. At 6 p.m., I got an email from Howard Chen. Diana, I heard through the grapevine that you're no longer with Harmon and Associates. I'm sorry to hear that, but not entirely surprised. Those people don't deserve you. If you're looking for opportunities, I have some colleagues in the industry who would be lucky to work with you. Call me when you're ready. I replied, thank you, Howard. I'll take you up on that. And at 8 p.m., I poured myself a glass of wine and sat by my window, watching the city lights come on across Seattle. Somewhere out there, Lester Harmon was at his winner's dinner, celebrating the Riverside deal without me, taking credit for work I'd done. But tomorrow morning, Catherine Osgood and her team would arrive at 1247 4th Avenue. They'd inspect the headquarters building, they'd confirm the violations, and they'd shut it down. The news broke on Wednesday. Harmon and Associates headquarters construction halted due to permit violations. The article was brief, clinical. The Seattle Department of Construction and Inspections had issued a stop work order on the building after discovering multiple permit compliance issues. Construction would remain halted until all permits were updated and approved. No timeline was given for when that might happen. Harmon and Associates declined to comment. By Thursday, the story had spread through the commercial real estate community. I started getting calls from former colleagues, competitors, industry contacts. Everyone wanted to know what had happened. Some had heard I'd left the company. Some had heard I'd been fired. Some had heard rumors that I was involved with the permit issues somehow. I kept my answers simple. I'd left Harmon and Associates to pursue other opportunities. I wished them well. I couldn't comment on their internal projects. By Friday, exactly 1 week after Lester Harmon had fired me, I had 3 job offers. One from a competing development firm that wanted me to head their acquisitions department. One from a commercial property management company that was expanding into development. And one from Howard Chen's former partner, who was starting a boutique development firm focused on sustainable urban projects. The third one interested me most. On Saturday, I met with Thomas Brennan for coffee. Not business, just 2 professionals who respected each other's work. The building's going to be tied up for months, he told me. The permit issues are worse than we initially thought. They'll have to bring in independent engineers to assess the structural compliance. The environmental impact study needs to be completely redone. They might have to retrofit parts of the building to meet current code. How much is this going to cost them? Conservatively, $3 to $5 million in delays, corrections, and fines. Maybe more. I thought about Lester Harmon, who'd fired me to save $210,000. That's unfortunate, I said. Thomas smiled. You know, I've been doing this job for 15 years. I've seen a lot of developers try to cut corners, ignore regulations, hope nobody notices. It catches up with them eventually. Usually does. For what it's worth, I'm glad you called me. This could have been much worse if they'd gotten all the way to occupancy before someone caught it. He was right. If the building had been completed, if Harmon and Associates had moved in, if tenants had leased space, and then the violations had been discovered, the consequences would have been catastrophic. I'd actually done them a favor in a way, though I doubted Lester Harmon saw it that way. I started my new position on June 14th. Director of Sustainable Development at Chen and Osgood Development. Yes, Thomas Brennan's supervisor Catherine Osgood, who'd left the city to partner with Howard Chen's former business partner Andrew Chen in a new venture. Small world, good world sometimes. The work was exactly what I'd hoped for. Projects that balanced profitability with community benefit. Development that enhanced neighborhoods rather than displacing them. Buildings designed for long-term sustainability, not short-term profit. We started with a mixed-use project in the Central District, affordable housing combined with locally owned retail. I used everything I'd learned at Harmon and Associates, all that knowledge about permits and regulations and city planning. But I used it the right way this time. In August, I ran into Douglas Finch at an industry conference. He looked tired, stressed. We nodded to each other across the conference hall but didn't speak. Later, someone told me he'd left Harmon and Associates. The headquarters building delays had been blamed on his oversight. Lester Harmon needed a scapegoat. Some people never learn. In October, when the headquarters building was supposed to have opened, I attended a ribbon cutting for our Central District project. The mayor was there, community leaders, local business owners who'd be leasing our retail space, families who'd be moving into the affordable units. Howard Chen was there too, retired but still connected, still caring about what happened in his city. You did good work here, Diana, he told me. Thank you, that means a lot coming from you. You know, I heard about what happened with Harmon and Associates, the headquarters building. Oh, terrible shame, all those permit issues. Very expensive mistake. He was watching me carefully and I knew he knew, or at least suspected. Yes, I said, a shame. Though I can't help but think, Howard continued, that if they'd valued the people who actually understood compliance and regulations and good business practices, maybe it wouldn't have happened. Maybe not. Some lessons cost more than others. They do, he smiled. I'm glad you landed on your feet, Diana. People like you always do. It's been 18 months now since that Friday afternoon email, since we don't have a plate for you at the winner's dinner. The Harmon and Associates headquarters building finally opened last month, 14 months behind schedule. The delays and corrections cost them over $6 million. They had to take out additional financing to cover the overruns. The company is smaller now, less ambitious. Lester Harmon is still CEO, but his reputation took a hit he won't recover from. I heard they sold the Riverside property to another developer. Couldn't afford to develop it themselves after the headquarters debacle. They still made a profit on the sale, but nothing like what they'd planned. Howard Chen's legacy will be developed by someone else now. I hope they honor what he built. I'd like to think they will. As for me, Chen and Osgood development is thriving. We've completed 3 projects and have 4 more in development. I made partner 6 months ago, full equity stake, profit sharing, decision-making authority. Everything I'd worked toward at Harmon and Associates, I found somewhere else. Somewhere better. My father asked me once if I regretted making that phone call to Thomas Brennan. If I wished I'd just let it go, moved on, not gotten involved. I told him the truth. I didn't make that call for revenge. I made it because it was the right thing to do. Buildings need to be safe. Permits need to be compliant. Rules exist for a reason, and when people ignore them, someone has to speak up. If Lester Harmon hadn't fired me, I probably would have discovered the violations eventually anyway. I probably would have brought them to Douglas Finch's attention. We probably would have fixed them before the city got involved. But Lester Harmon did fire me, and once I no longer worked for the company, I had no obligation to protect them from their own negligence. That's not revenge, that's just consequences. The business world runs on relationships, on trust, on keeping your promises. When you break those principles, when you treat people as disposable, when you prioritize short-term savings over long-term integrity, eventually it catches up with you. Lester Harmon learned that lesson. It cost him $6 million and 14 months of delays and a damaged reputation. I learned a different lesson, that doing good work matters, that treating people with respect matters, that empathy and integrity aren't weaknesses, they're strengths. My parents taught me that in their modest house in Tacoma, and 11 years at Harmon and Associates couldn't shake it loose. One email on a Friday afternoon couldn't diminish it. And in the end, those values served me better than any corner office or title or bonus ever could have. I still think about that Friday sometimes. About reading that email at 4:47 p.m. About the fluorescent lights humming in my empty office. About walking out of that building for the last time, knowing my career there was over. It felt like an ending then. It was actually a beginning. The best opportunities in my career came after I left Harmon and Associates. The best relationships, the best projects, the best work. The chance to build something meaningful, something that reflects my values, something I can be proud of. All because someone decided I wasn't worth a plate at the winner's dinner. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you turns out to be the best thing. You just have to be patient enough to see it, and professional enough to handle it right. I didn't sabotage Harmon and Associates. I didn't seek revenge. I didn't do anything except verify public information and allow the proper authorities to do their jobs. But I also didn't protect people who'd broken their promises to me. There's a difference between seeking revenge and simply stepping aside and letting consequences happen. One is vindictive, the other is just fair. Lester Harmon wanted to save money on my bonus. He made a business decision. I respected that decision by no longer treating his problems as my responsibility. That's fair too. The Seattle skyline looks different now when I see it from my office window at Chen and Osgood. I can see some of the buildings I worked on at Harmon and Associates. I can see the headquarters building that caused all that trouble. And I can see the projects I'm working on now. Buildings that will house families, support local businesses, contribute to the community in meaningful ways. That's the real win, not the salary, not the title, not the revenge. The chance to do work that matters with people who value it. Everything else is just details. And I've always been good with details. If this story resonated with you, if you appreciate these kinds of real-world lessons about integrity and consequences, I'd be grateful if you'd subscribe. Thank you for being here.